Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last session of Future School. Thank you to the people who is joining here and the people who is joining here and over YouTube. So this is two situations faced at the same time. But I'm very happy to be here. We have Oscar Caballero, Ensayos Urbanos, Elisa Silva, y Fernanda Canales to basically close this residency of La Escuela National Academy of Design for a month. We've been working around biomaterials, speculating with not only materials, but also their history, traditions, elements, and things that can happen with like this exploration, but at the same time, like all the artistic research that other artists, like Maria Elena Pombo and Jessica Briceño, have been bringing here. So we are closing with architecture, but there's been kind of like an interesting exchange between both disciplines, art and architecture. And it's been very interesting for me to learn about all the different approaches that you can have like to biomaterials. So for this last session, we have Oscar and Ensayos Urbanos sharing their experience with the people that also are here and some of the participants and students that you've been collaborating actively to make this happen. And you have like all these pieces in the gallery that you cannot see, but I'm trying to also move things around to see all the work that we've been doing for over a month now. But I think this work needs to be explained by Oscar and Ensayos Urbanos, and I will be quickly reading their bios. Oscar Caballero is an architect, academic researcher, and visual artist based in New York. He holds a Master of Science in Advanced Architectural Design from Columbia University, Planning and Preservation. He currently leads a multidisciplinary practice in which he served as architectural design director and project manager at Bonetti Kosterski Architecture. He is also a member of the non-for-profit design collective Territorial Empathy, where he develops initiatives aimed at creating meaningful impact in underserved communities. In parallel, he develops independent architectural projects, teaches as an adjunct assistant professor at Columbia, and collaborates with Latin American art institutes such as the American Society. And in Buenos Aires, Ensayos Urbanos is a transdisciplinary collective founded in Buenos Aires in 2019 that investigates urban spaces through an empirical approach, through tactical and collective actions, spatial, material, artistic, and/or performative. It seeks to transform complex spaces for the common good. The collective emerged from a concern with teaching methodologies disconnected from the realities of the city, prioritizing instead of direct engagement with environments, bodies, and tensions that shape the urban life. It promotes horizontal pedagogical methodologies, situated learning, and interdisciplinary knowledge production. Since its founding, it has become a platform for disciplinary conversions, developing networks and collaborative teams that activate communities across the cities in Latin America and Europe. I would like to say also that Oscar and Ensayos Urbanos are what we call faculty of La Escuela, that have been collaborating with us in other projects, laboratories. So it was also for us a good opportunity to put them in contact, and part of this program that we're doing here at the National Academy of Design is also this aim of La Escuela, creating these connections between Latin America and Latinx artists in the US. That's another reason that we're happy to have Elisa and Fernanda here that are part of our faculty community and network, and that in other projects, in other forms of collaboration, also we've been in contact and also following their practices. So it's a big pleasure to have all of you here in this room, and hopefully we'll be ending this with a Q&A and conversation among all of them. So please, Oscar and Ensayos Urbanos, you can open the conversation and lead the project and explain your work here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share. Okay. Are you able to hear well? Should I this volume? Okay.
I will bring the volume to you.
Nice. Well, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. This week has been intense in the best way. I feel we've had like these sort of like wavelengths of energy, starting like with the opening of the installation on Tuesday, and then kind of like more intimate workshop, introspective workshop yesterday, and then finalizing today with the talk I'm really excited to, be part of La Escuela's kind of like cosmology and group. It's been fascinating to see the work they have been doing for the last years, a work that has been like progressively expanding and having the opportunity to match with ensayos urbanos was interesting too. So I feel that's part of like the spirit of what Miguel and La Escuela have been doing, that is building these bridges of knowledge and pedagogies. And we are going to talk a little bit about our practices individually and then a little bit about the installation here that is pretty much rooted not only by us, but through conversations with La Escuela, but also like I think an acute reading of what Future Schools as an installation is and the work that the National Academy of Design is doing. So I'm gonna start okay, with ensayos urbanos, guys, if you are with 2%, yes. And I'm
Buenas,
gonna flip
sí.
the slides for you.
Ok, Oscar, ¿podemos hablar en español, en castellano? ¿Hay algún problema con eso?
Okay, let's maybe it can be like a brief presentation and then you can translate it. No?
Yeah.
Or you can translate like what they're speaking.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Ok. Bueno, hola a todos, es un placer compartir este panel con ustedes. Como contaban en la presentación, ensayos urbanos es una materia transdisciplinar de la Facultad de Arquitectura, Diseño y Urbanismo de la UBA en Buenos Aires. Es una materia que arrancó en el 2019. Si querés, Oscar, podemos ir pasando.
Sí.
Em,
Perfect.
Vos me parás cuando quieras traducir.
Tal
La
vez,
idea es,
tal vez lo hacemos slide por slide. We're gonna test my skills with my family. I usually cross between and translate the opposite. So Ensayos Urbanos is a collective from based in Buenos Aires. They teach at UBA, and yeah, I'm gonna try to keep short segments, and I can, yeah.
ok. Bueno, la idea de ensayos urbanos un poco es trabajar con el espacio público, con el espacio urbano y poder tener reflexiones y tener una postura crítica y por tal motivo activar esos espacios en un sentido del bien común. Sí, y esto en general lo podemos hacer a través de colectivos y de estudiantes que participan de la materia, dándole una nueva identidad o un nuevo sentido a ese espacio o a esos materiales también con los que vamos trabajando a lo largo de la cursada. Si querés, puedes ir pasando algunas
Sí.
slides
Okay.
para mostrar.
So yeah, part of what Ensayos Urbanos is doing is they're kind of like collaborating at the scale of the kind of like urban fabric, but also creating these projects through students' participation and with a real focus on materiality and exploration of form making through materiality.
Perfecto, en este caso es un ejemplo de estudiantes que trabajaron con un residuo plástico y transformaron un espacio colectivo que venimos laburando, que se llama El Galpón, donde hicimos eh, el portal la semana pasada, trabajando un poco con la idea de derechos humanos y un poco con la idea de materiales reciclados o trabajar un poco con la idea de cómo volver a darle otros sentidos a los residuos abundantes que tenemos.
Yeah, so this is, for example, one of the projects that they developed. This is actually Re.
Ahí volvió, no los escuchaba,
Ah.
perdón. Bueno, si quieren podemos ir pasando. Las primeras diapositivas son procesos de estudiantes en diferentes cursadas que fueron trabajando con materiales que traían a clase, tanto los CDs como los plásticos en todas sus versiones. Y
So
fueron
these are different experiments that they have been doing in class, pretty much with materials that students go out and find and then they bring to the class, and then they start kind of like working through it to create these installations.
Ok, en este caso, por ejemplo, los estudiantes estaban trabajando con metales de latas de Coca-Cola, de cerveza, además, y además trabajamos en un ex taller mecánico que también se transformó en un residuo de la ciudad, con lo cual pudimos activar ese espacio también colectivamente y a través de performance bueno, colectivos artísticos en toda su amplia gama.
Mhm. So in this case, they were working with Coca-Cola and beer cans, and they managed to bring these back to like this mechanical shop, where they activated the red light installation on the right.
Esto también en el mismo espacio, en el mismo galpón, con las tapitas de la Coca-Cola metálicas, crearon, bueno, diferentes espacialidades en este galpón y podemos seguir pasando.
Yeah.
Bueno, esto a través del tejido y se activó con dos bailarinas que trabajan en relación también a la gravedad que este material provocaba en los cuerpos.
Mm. So like different iterations with materials that are kind of like woven as like textiles and then activated with, in this case, with performers that also kind of like engage with like the gravity of their own bodies and with these pieces.
Perfecto, más ejemplos de la cursada, en este caso con maples, podemos seguir pasando con
Like different
cartones.
materialities, but same prompt.
Bien, esta estudiante que era de diseño gráfico trabajó con las caras de personas detenidas desaparecidas en la dictadura militar en la Argentina y generó una gran lámpara, como se ve en la
Mm.
AXO, y con ella, bueno, se activó tanto internamente y espacialmente ese galpón y las personas podían transitar y ver estos jóvenes que son
Mm.
parte de nuestra historia.
Mm. So this is again another installation in the same space that they activated this week. In this case, showcasing documentation and missing people from that disappeared during the period of the dictatorship, and just to kind of like create this kind of like lantern piece. If I may add something that maybe they will mention later, is that they told us this week. Um, this space that is part of like the campus, and correct me if I'm wrong, there has been ongoing excavations because there's still human remains being found. But you know, it's sort of like this nuance of the space that is part of the campus, been activated through like the student work. But there's also this component of like material memory that lives there and or is trapped in there, which I feel it's fascinating with this installation in particular.
Exacto, aún la historia se está recomponiendo, se están buscando partes de esa memoria, así que nosotros estamos trabajando ahí en el galpón. Si querés podemos seguir pasando, Oscar. Bueno,
So
acá también trabajando ya con biomateriales, ¿no? Con hojas de gomeros y dándole nuevas identidades y sensorialidades a los espacios. Podemos seguir pasando.
so also working with biomaterials and trying to find that new identity through the same kind of like techniques.
Ok, y acá cambiamos un poco la escala. El ducto urbano es una intervención que hicimos con muchos colectivos que también nos ayudaron a activar este espacio. Fue en el marco de la Bienal de Arquitectura en el 2024 en Puerto Madero y la intención fue sacar la exposición del museo y activarlo en el espacio urbano, en la calle, en el espacio público. Por tanto, la
Okay,
escala
so
tenía que acompañarnos.
okay, good. I'm trying to like gather. So for this one, we're changing scale, so it's going up, and it's in the framework of the Buenos Aires Architecture Biennial. This was like a collaboration with more entities that came together to build this installation, and the whole point of this was to bring the installation outside of the museum and kind of like take part of like that urban space that, as you can see, has been or was reconfigured in different areas and different ways and formalities too.
Y algo importante para sumar del ducto, que después lo fuimos activando en diferentes partes de la ciudad posterior a la Bienal, es que es una pieza constituida con material reciclado de los sachets de leche. No sé si en Estados Unidos está ese formato, pero bueno, es un plástico reciclado que tiene más de 200 metros cada unidad, o sea, cada móvil.
Oh, wow. So the whole installation is made out of like recycle milk containers that it's just all these orange pieces kind of like assemble again together. And then they were kind of like installing it in like beyond the time of the biennial in different areas of the city.
Bien, esto es más muestrario de nuestras activaciones con el ducto. En este caso se ve el espacio, el galpón donde hoy día estamos trabajando. Se puede ver, bueno, el arroyo desentubado. Es un arroyo que se llama Medrano, que está entubado en toda la ciudad, y esto es la pieza que es donde se empieza a conectar con el río. Está el campo de deportes y el galpón es que es este espacio de memoria que se está construyendo en este momento, junto, bueno, a nuestras actividades también y a los estudiantes y bueno, derechos humanos y demás.
Yeah. So this is just a bit more of like to situate. This is the area Galpon where they have been activating through school, and then it's like this interesting connection with the river. Is sort of like at the outer edges of the campus for what I understand. And then it's like this memory that it's kind of like building itself as they're also working in the space.
Okay, y como última instancia también trajimos un poco para abrir esta idea de activar a través de residuos cero o a través de biomateriales una activación que hicimos en Bariloche, en el sur de Argentina, con materiales existentes de este arroyo que se llamaba Nireco. Y bueno, hicimos una intervención colectiva por allí.
Nice. And just to bring the conversation kind of like outside of like what we've been seeing, this is also like installation made out of like local found elements activating this part of like this threshold between the river and the land and the coast. Nice. Great. I hope I did well as translator.
Muchas gracias.
Of course, no, gracias. Oh, great. So I'm gonna share a little bit of like different projects that I think connect to Seca del Sol as well. So part of like my kind of like research and pedagogical approach is very rooted in my own, Nicaraguan context, like being born in Nicaragua, grew up in Nicaragua, and understanding ourselves as political beings because we're part of a political framework that is shaping us. And at the same time, we're also contributing to shaping it and how that also resonates across, territories, even if you're there, you're here. And in my case, working through exile gives like an interesting perspective to things that you kind of like normalize or they're so close to you that kind of like need some space to rethink and kind of like navigate. So I think a lot of these works are a way to kind of like situate yourself in your own context and make sense of it. So the first little project I wanted to show is the teardown of the chayopalos. Chayopalos is a popular term known for metal trees that populated the capital, and now they're populating the whole country. They're political artifacts commissioned by the regime, and they were the target of the protests in 2018 when there was an uprising against the dictatorship. So I named this little chapter "Dozens of Metal Trees Burn and Collapse," which is the title that newspapers were kind of like showcasing at the time. And it's sort of like an interesting way of understanding the ecologies of the city with these metal trees that it's so intrinsic to how we think of erasure and the progression of like what's happening through urban policy. And how interesting it was when these kind of like monuments, political artifacts became the image of what the dictatorship represents in terms of like oppression and the uprising of like this new movement as well. So during this protest, people were cutting these trees down like as a real tree, and in many cases, these trees were kind of like installed in areas that were green, and then actual trees were being torn down in order to install these trees. And there's this whole conversation about mismanagement of like governmental funds to create these like massive initiative. This Nicaragua is a small country, and by 2018 there were hundreds of these trees across the capital. And there's like very iconic photos where you see just full avenues just covered with one of these trees every 20 meters. And what also started happening was like this interesting moment where these sort of like synthetic ecologies became a device to appropriate urban memory. So what you see on the left is a monument. It was not a civic monument, but it was a monument that, in a way, gave away some of the methodologies that the regime started using to appropriate the memory of some of the monuments and buildings. And it started with this insertion of propaganda all over these infrastructures or architectures. And when that is not enough, then erasure becomes the next step. So, you first on the left see the appropriation of it, and then you see the demolition of that. So it creates this sort of like um, just these parallel realities where the same site has been occupied by all these different entities. And what remains right now is this sort of like synthetic ecologies created by the regime. And that kind of like makes me think of like how this landscape starts reshaping what we understand as the city and citizenship. And where do we find ourselves within that, and how that helps or breaks so many different like norms in which you understand yourself in this context, in this society. And it creates this scale of grace, right? And part of that I learned and that it was interesting to learn through this research was, in order to do some of these very big political moves, you need to kind of like tell a little bit of truth. So a lot of the urban policies regarding earthquakes were exacerbated a little bit too much. So they were using the excuse of like this volatile territorial condition in order to say it's okay to demolish all of these infrastructures, monuments, buildings, even though through, there was plenty of proof that they were sound, and there was no reason to actually demolish them by the reasons they were presenting. So this sort of like erupted landscape sort of like presents itself in many different ways. I feel landscape is something that I'm very interested in. Funny enough, Nicaragua, as an architecture program, there's not a lot of focus on urbanism and landscape per se in architecture school. But I feel this is sort of like the scale that I've been more drawn to. And maybe because it kind of like holds more of like the layers where you can find similarities with other people in diaspora as well. And it's been interesting to kind of like create this comparison or assimilation between how does an eruptive landscape and a landscape that is always changing, that is always transforming, also affects the way that you think about politics and architecture. And, is this like amalgama of all these different realities that even though they might seem very opposite to each other or that they don't relate, the more you kind of like zoom in close, it explains a lot of what's going on now for us. And there's always this sense of like, research and scientific methods, but there's also this sense of like the myth and fable and how trying to find ways to use nature to inspire us to tell stories that are a little bit difficult to maybe understand right away. So a lot of these projects have been a combination of essays, of visual art, but also an important focus on physical printed material, especially because in Nicaragua, as of 2018, there was no free press and there was no printed newspaper because the paper was confiscated by the regime. So this sense of like being able to physically have pedagogical tools has been kind of like at the forefront of these initiatives. So a lot of these essays have been printed by, kind of like guerrilla style and through different organizations that have supported that. And they have been sharing different educational settings. And part of that journey also led me to double with like ecofiction and like this sense of like speculation that is linked to the myth. So understanding reality through also mechanisms of speculation and fictional ways of representing the truth. And last year, I had the opportunity to do this collaboration with a sociologist called Christoph Bradner. He was writing this book about the future of cities and how cities should really kind of like be at the core of how we understand ourselves as communities, as a cell that can kind of like connect through other cells and build these bridges between them. So he had seen my project Automata, which is actually a project developed during my master's at Columbia. And we started brainstorming this new iteration of the project where we're talking about very real and present reality things like ecosystems changing and land ownership and automatization and extractivism, but then also constructing a new way of understanding these stories that can be a little bit more like Trojan horse as a kind of like a fun visual that it just draws you to understand more of it. And the book was published early this year by Columbia Press. So if I have a chance, read it. It's amazing. I didn't write it. It's his writing. We did a small writing collaboration at the in the introduction of the book, and I did basically the cover for it and then the illustrations that go along with the book. And it was an interesting process because it's the first time that I've worked as in a collaboration that is mostly like through visual work, but very rooted in like architectural theory. And along that way, this is another project that talks a little bit about landscape, but from a different angle. I had the chance to do this public artwork last year at the Hispanic Society Museum and Library in the Heights. It was an open call. I applied to this before, got it. And it was like a combination of like random, I guess, things that I didn't know about the museum, like their whole archive on cartographies, imported flora and fauna. It's still a very Eurocentric museum, but the whole stuff is, from the Heights. So there's so many different cultures and nationalities involved that I feel the common alignment is like they were ready to, commission work that can be kind of like creating this dialogue with the museum that is not so much like following the same Eurovision cosmology of it. So these are some photos of the installation. That's me. It became like this botanical installation, and for me, this is my way to understand how to make a map. It was like a dysfunctional map of ecologies that had been impacted by the Pan American Highway. For those who, I mean, living in Latin America, especially in Central America, the Pan American Highway is like always there because most of our infrastructural systems are in the Pacific. So there's no way that if you want to go to the airport or, at different times, you will always be in contact with the Pan American Highway. And there was so many, like, there's so much nuance in the visuals that were used to present this project, the maps that were created, the visuals that keep until today exacerbating this image of what Latin America is and how, how we are represented in these maps and in these visuals. The language that you can read in these first maps was super interesting. These jungles have been pierced and it's this like man over nature and very, this sense of colonization as its maximum uh, power. And so this map translated into this idea of how long does it take for something to become local, and as a metaphor of ourselves to like migrating, being second generation, third generation, like how much time does it need to pass for you to be from a place? And I got to think about that with these plants. Like a lot of these plants, I work with an amazing collaborator for the landscape, Duay Portocarrero, who's also a landscape artist. We selected flowers, different plants that could also hold a sense of like cultural memory and that could enable people to somehow connect with it. And that was sort of like proof throughout the exhibition, how it enabled all these different like dialogues between the visitors. And because it's in a public space, it was also interesting to see this, just the crossover between the museum that is in front of Boricua College and then some of these plants even being extracted from the exhibition, which was sort of like cherry on top, like Natura Extracta extracted. And along, this map, there were all these sort of like little caveat moments of information about the Pan American Highway. And it became this place that it's so not green around. It's just like this very arid terrace. And by having this little patch of green in the center, there was so many, pollinators, birds, insects, and it was also an opportunity to bring the classroom outside of the classroom. These are my students from that semester. Terrence is here. He's over there in that photo with our first assignment. And, that leads me to field devices, and I'm going to go a little bit faster now, which is the studio that I developed last year with my students. And it became this opportunity to keep telling stories through very unconventional pedagogical exercises. A lot of these exercises have been kind of like lined up by the general syllabus of the school. And then we had an opportunity to kind of like develop them further and kind of like focus on certain narratives that had to do with ecologies, but also like understanding ourselves within the ritualistic aspect of how to engage with nature. And futility meaning it doesn't have like a capitalist aim or is not trying to serve a capitalist purpose. We're not producing devices or designing things that necessarily will be, sold or for commercialization, etc. So, and a lot of like ephemerality, like how to map ephemeral elements. And these are some of those projects. And okay, we learned to Secada del Sol, Sun Drive. It's a translatorial collaboration between Ciudades Urbanos, me, Buenos Aires, New York. So the overview is we had this week to activate the space. So we started on Tuesday with a performance by Lolo Ostia, who's a dear friend and collaborator. She's a biomaterialist, so she also was doing a workshop on bioplastics, which are some of the pieces that you can see in the last desk. It was really fun. You're gonna see some images in a bit. We did a clay and writing workshop that is pretty much what you're seeing on the desk right now, and then finalizing with this panel. And I mean, Miguel was extremely gracious, I would say, because it was really like an open uh, forum to like propose anything. And the kind of like conversation evolved. We knew like biomaterials, ecologies, and it sort of like formed itself. So the prompt was very simple. A suspended archive where materials, recipes, and stories are left to weather as a collective pedagogical act. And it has this inspiration coming from like meat racks in not only Latin America, but like throughout the world, like the action of like weather something and how these elements can be transformed by combination of like different materials. But instead of hanging meat, we're hanging bioplastics, which biomaterials, elements made out of upcycled material as well. And it's this sort of like analogy of like letting things hang and transform and create interconnections and dialogues. There's elements that are more raw. As you can see, there's some samples, but then there are elements that are a little bit more worked, like the clay. Um, so now I'm gonna pass through what we did in Buenos Aires, which was actually amazing to see before they speak. The week before we started activating the space, we had a little Zoom call with them in the school, and it was just like amazing to see all the rope coming from all over the place in the classroom, and so many incredible exercises with biomaterials. And what I thought it was interesting, which is kind of like what we're aiming to do, is to think about materiality, but also don't stop there. Like it's not just about the material, it's about the application of the material and how you transform that material. So they had incredible work by their students that are already assembling different structures using the biomaterials as if they were, fabrics or cardboard or bricks. So I'll let Re continue.
Sí, estuvo súper divertido el portal de biomateriales. Muchos estudiantes trabajaron con, bueno, desde gelatinas hasta hojas, pencas de remolacha, bueno, hay muchas variantes que todavía están explorando, pero la verdad que lo que sucedió y el experimento con Lolo también fue súper divertido. Estaban todos muy copados.
So it was really fun, and they had all these different like experiments using like I actually just forgot remolacha. How do you say remolacha? Uh, Primo? Beets. Okay, beets and like different plants, and then they were using what else did you say, Renata? Well, there was bacteria. I do remember that. Bacteria being mapped with a kaleidoscope. That was a really, really cool experiment. And then while Lola was here, actually that's where you are, Monique and Robert, we had the cooktop and then we're passing the laptop and our cell phone. So she was given the recipe and they were here in the galpon, also following the same recipe we're doing here. So it was really like a portal. It was like a parallel experience.
Sí, están trabajando con módulos y ya espacializando esos materiales, biomateriales. Hasta tenemos como una pared flexible, porque o sea, como una analogía con el muro de ladrillo. Tenemos hojas de choclo, tenemos un montón de materiales que es impresionante ver como qué qué sensaciones también aporta al espacio y cómo los cuerpos se relacionan con eso.
So they have been working with, they have even like these flexible partitions made out of these materials. They were using, well, this is bioplastic, but you're gonna see there the corn leaves. They say choclo, we say maíz. But it's been also interesting to see how these materials not only affect the space, but also the way that we perceive the space. Nice. And here they were pouring the bioplastic over the parchment paper. And we were using both. I mean, that's something we kind of like, it was fun to coordinate. We had, Lolo had been picking all week like dry flowers from her garden. And then in Buenos Aires, they also had like dry leaves. So we're combining that into the bioplastic. And then here, there's Lolo. And then this is the crew.
Quiero decirles que hemos tratado de filmar todo el proceso. Ahí se ve a Mika sosteniendo el trípode con la cámara. Muchas
They've been
gracias
trying to like
por el intercambio.
get all these different angles to like record the process. And I have to say, I feel because there's something about how the space drives the experiments that I feel here we were like doing small samples, but you guys were like going all out, pouring the pots, you know, into like bigger pieces of parchment paper, which was fun to see. Okay, and then here we have some images of like this week. Here the process was a little bit based on like this offering ritual, which I pretty much was inspired by La Escuela's activation at MoMA PS1 last year, where Miguel invited us to bring notebooks and to kind of like do a little bit of homework and study different artists from the Escuela's library. And then I thought, what a great way to, you know, bring a participatory spirit to a space that is meant to be for that. Some of the conversations that I've heard about this exhibition that we, you know, during the opening is not only a space to showcase or displaying, it's also a space that is designed in a way that you can also make things. So I feel that was a really nice thing to anchor and to think of like what's existing and try to come up with like this tendedero, this cloth line that could follow the prompt of like the meat drying racks. So a lot of the things that you see here, I mean, all of them really are offerings. And they were coming from different, you know, people like students, colleagues, artists, strangers that saw the open call and they came and they brought a little piece of them. And then what we've been developing with the workshops too in some of them. And I think that prompted a lot of conversations about, you know, it's just recipes being shared. It's like an exchange of information that is also so embedded in your own cultural upbringing and how do you understand sharing even. A lot of some friends that participated there in like they're cooks, so they cook for community kitchens, and now that they are kind of experimenting with biomaterials, it's been just like an incredible bridge because it's the same as cooking. You have to care for the recipe and make sure that you put all the ingredients in the right amounts. So, and I think writing is always like a good part to anchor everything because it's a way that you can kind of like see the message behind the creation too. So these are some of the samples from the workshop with Lolo. And then yesterday we had a more kind of like intimate workshop with clay. And basically the prompt was you can do whatever you want and just come up with like a feudal device. It doesn't need to have a function or serve for any, you know, thing in particular. And I think some of the results were really, really beautiful. And we had also some people just walking into the gallery that was also nice to engage with because they just came in and they sat down and stayed for like an hour and chatted with everyone, and that was really nice. And I think that might be, yeah, that's the end of the question. Thank you.
I'm gonna pass back the volume to me quickly. But thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Ensayos Urbanos. It was interesting to see the presentation because I experienced this portal live, and it was so interesting. But also, it was even more interesting to see, like, for example, Ensayos Urbanos documentation in the way they were kind of like filming this while it was happening, and indeed it was interesting also how the shape and the space allow more possibility for more like raw and large scale experimentation. So something that somehow born on this context space, it took like really force in Buenos Aires in that way. In For La Escuela, it was very interesting because we always have this fantasy of creating this exchange between two different places, something online and on site. And normally it doesn't work, but I think that portal worked very well. And I was so pleased when I was like seeing, okay, this is not only functioning beautiful in theory, in practice, it's also worked well. And then I went back to La Escuela team and say also share this excitement that actually this is a good idea of something that we can continue. So it's nice when we throw in an experiment, and then the experiment, thankfully, and thank to all of you, it worked very well and give us like energy to continue doing more of this exchange and connection. So I would love to invite now to Elisa Silva to continue the presentation. We love the idea not only present like this small scale projects, but also other practice from people also that we think that are from La Escuela. Elisa doesn't have a tenure track for us, but for La Escuela, all of these contribution, participations within the platform, we consider them all faculty. So it's like a great pleasure to have Elisa and also Fernanda here. Elisa Silva is an architect, educator, and founder of Enlace Arquitectura and Enlace Fundación. Her professional practice has focused on public space and urban integration, including work within informal settlements and neighborhoods. She's co-author of CABA, Cartography of the Neighborhoods of Caracas, 2014, and author of Pure Space, Public Space Transformations in Informal Settlements of Latin America, ACTAR, 2020. Elisa is an associate professor of Florida International University in Miami and a lecturer at Harvard GSD in Boston. She holds a Master of Architecture degree from Harvard Graduate School of Design. She's also a dear colleague and friend from Venezuela. So again, I'm very happy to be connected again in multiple times and multiple phases and continue like this relationship with you, Elisa. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Miguel, and thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to converse and get to know other people's practices too. So I'm gonna be mindful of time and try to go right into it. If I can figure out here where my here we go, full screen, and okay. Okay, so I've prepared something very brief that I'm going to read, and then I'll go through three projects from the office. And what you're looking at right now are images from the barrio La Palomera in Caracas, where we've been working nearly now 10 years. So at Enlace Arquitectura and Enlace Foundation, we have sought to approach and learn from other ways of being and doing in the world, process of world making or worlding. And it's precisely the territories, communities, and dynamics of our complex global south that offer a sense of clarity. What emerges is a mixture of narratives, motives, and conceptualizations of what we call the good life or la buena vida that operate outside the logic of consumption. It is well worth listening to and studying what they show us, given the worrying urgency of this particular historical moment regarding our degradation of our planet, basically. It is becoming increasingly unethical to continue with our professional practice with this inertia, going about business as usual, and supporting an urban development that in its guise is an economic engine, but also a devastator of our environment. So for us, the opportunity to work within these territories alongside diverse communities operating outside the market logic has been a revelatory path for problematizing our practice as architects. It is not only about distancing ourselves from these development processes, but also the opportunity to learn different ways of understanding design processes, their authorship, who participates, and their content and meaning. So self-built neighborhoods such as the Barrio La Palomera represents a challenging territory in this sense, but a provocator. Positioned here, situated here, what we have found relevant is to do this very particular exercise of recording pre-existences, to value understand what already exists, and to embrace and record this as a fundamental process of design. So I'll start with the case study of La Casa de Todos in La Palomera, but not as a design of our office, but of a practice of our understanding of architecture together with this evolving space. It is not simply a physical improvement project, but an intervention that challenges the hierarchies of our profession. And by proposing a space that celebrates the commons, existence also with non-humans, and community sovereignty, the Anexo becomes an exemplifying practice of worlding and resistance. So with that, I'll introduce you briefly to La Palomera as a springboard of all sorts of understandings about architecture. And it is this tiny little barrio here at the southern part of the city in the middle. What you see here in darker colors, like a navy, is our so-called informal settlements, or barrios, as we call them in Caracas, in Venezuela. And it was part of a work that we did called CABA, Cartografía de los Barrios de Caracas. And here's La Palomera. It has approximately 16 hectares of space. And what you saw on those images was this 18-month process that we called Integración en Proceso Caracas, where we just invited people, build on celebrations like the Cross of May, and then with this beautiful way of learning about the neighborhood and the people, this space was signaled out to us as a space that had been abandoned for over 3 decades. And with a consensus from the alcaldía, from the municipality, we were able to, over the years, we're in year number 6 of this process, to convert this space in what is today an art and a cultural center called Anexo Casa de Todos. And all sorts of activities happen here, both with artists that come from without, architects too, but also internal gastronomy. We have karate, dance, music, but the central garden that is so much of the personality of this place, because that's where we interact with otherness in a way that is very palpable. We also have birds and tortoises and cats that live amongst us here. So the garden is also changing all the time, depending a bit on those who are caring for it. I think gardens are in the DNA, definitely, of La Palomera, and it's something that we showed at the biennial in Venice in 2021. Curated by Hashim Sarkis. And we, did a study of all the plantings, all the botany of this. We called it the ethnobotanical dictionary of the plants of La Palomera. So these gardens and all of their plantings and conucos, which are like small holdings or small agricultural plots, instead of being kind of designed, they're recorded. What is becomes a drawing. And it's a beautiful way, I think, of expanding our understanding of design and acknowledging, recognizing the work of others as instrumental in understanding what is pertinent and what we can put volume on. So here you see the Anexo Casa de Todos with the Casa de Todos in a future expansion that we hope to begin soon, completely tied with its surroundings. It is of the barrio. It doesn't try to be different from the barrio. And it has an identity too. This is the flag of La Casa de Todos, which was designed together. Well, it was a course instructed by Ricardo Baez, who's a very well-known graphic designer in Caracas, but it came from the kids, but potentially can be read as the garden in the center with spaces around, or the people around, but this is the idea. And it becomes this sort of lantern at night with the flag right next to it. More than a space, though, it is this fantastic network of people that we are inspired by on the kind of exterior parts, those who have supported us financially, those who have inspired us within the neighborhood without collaborations, alliances, those who work hard and pretty much on a quotidian basis, the spaces. We've just tried to sort of problematize this and say, this Casa de Todos is not a physical artifact as much as it is all of the affection and relationships that it forges. Through those relationships, we really believe that a new narrative is created with regard to the self-built neighborhood. This is one of our governance meetings that we have on a monthly basis, and producing this plural governance for a place that I think is now at a par, absolutely, with any other cultural center in Caracas. And we've also tried to map the complexity of this. It takes time and years. These projects are ongoing, and that I think is also something that for us as a practice has been very interesting to absorb into our everyday work. So in La Palomera, at the very edge, you will find this space, which has been kind of a buffer zone, a non-buildable zone, contentious. This is La Palomera. But around it are other neighborhoods. This is a historic colonial fabric, a damero from the Spanish foundations. And then you have urbanizations much more recent in the 1980s, for example, called Piedra Azul over here. And then you have buildings up here that are 20 stories high, Vista Ventura, and then Manzanares. So there's a huge potential here of having this nothing space, el no lugar, the non-place, become something. Down here, number 2 is the Casa de Todos, and what you're seeing are paths that we imagine can become part of that extended green, our common forest, bosque común. And this project is something that we're doing with the support of REARC that works out of Sweden. There's also a high school right here that is very important, and the middle-class neighborhood that you see right here. All these number 4s are folks who are taking care of small trees in their homes, so a kind of a dispersed nursery that is trying to fulfill the promise of this territory. So here you see it. Here's the high school, here's the Barrio La Palomera and the middle-class family, and the buildings above called Vista Ventura. And it has forever been this way. I've been associating and close to the neighbors of La Palomera for nearly 10 years, and it goes through cycles of being sometimes subject to fires, because in the dry season it can get to be quite incendiary. So another issue here has been that over time, at the very top of this cliff, which is where the barrio is, neighbors have built onto the ground with escombros, with debris. And this practice continues, and it's also quite worrisome. So here we are building on our fabric, our networks that I explained earlier. These are our neighbors of Piedra Azul, where we were explaining the ideas of this project. And here is a typical day of planting trees. We do these every Saturday, and then there's a core team that plants on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well. But some of these are from Vista Ventura, some of them are from Piedra Azul, the middle-class neighborhood, and some of them are our friends from La Palomera. And this has become such a beautiful way of exchanging fears and talking about, like, well, but I thought the barrio was violent, and oh no, come anytime. It's really dispelled a lot of these prejudices that people have. So with maps, and this is one of the public spaces that we've built with the neighbors some years ago, we're together looking over the map, like, is this going to be our common land? Are we going to promise ourselves that we're never going to infringe on this and cherish it and protect it as a forest? And this is Carmen, who's become my friend now since 2017. And this is the pact. So we've built kind of what we call a Carta del Barrio. And through collaboration with artist Gabriel Perez, we created these 8 of them that we, with stamps, build kind of the idea of this forest with children. And then here we go with the process of how do you make a forest. The projection is 4,000 trees to be planted. Well, La Casa de Todos is now itself a nursery that we've been curating, and there are about 60 different species of trees that have been identified, and the idea that their coloring is going to sort of change throughout the year. This is a combined plan that shows in sections some of the interventions over the territory, and the small dots are all the trees that have been planted to date. We've planted so far 2,700 trees, so we're 1,300 short of our goal. Days of planting consist of various people who come. Some are volunteers from the university, some are just curious folks. Artists often have accompanied us on these days of planting. And basically, it's a very sloped territory, about 30% often. And we basically have to do la bancada, make a flat area, open the holes, prepare the spaces for the people that come to volunteer, and also those of us who are part of the team ongoing. So a tree is planted approximately every 3 meters and marked with a peg so that we know where it is. A system for watering all of this is, of course, super important. So here you see our map of the watering. Part of it is collected through rainwater. We've created these roofs out of half bamboos that take the water to a channel, the kind of the gutter, takes it then down to a tank of water. This is a collaboration with another entity in Caracas called Lata de Agua and Laurencio Sanchez. So sometimes we need gabions to kind of secure where this is placed. And the reason we in the end opted for these is because once the trees are grown, we'll take the tanks out and they'll be able to survive on water alone. Sometimes we use all of that debris to create these gabions. They are amazing. They're super effective, and they've been a way to kind of recycle all that material back into. And then the runoff excess is taken into these ollas de filtración or filtration devices. So going further, you're now going to see that there's all sorts of paths that weave through the space that we've been building also with bamboo. And the bamboo we get from one of our friends who has a big bambusal, and it's actually essentially free material. Senor Venancio puts these together in a brilliant way. And then a lot of that debris and found stones on site has also been used to create these gabions to stop water from advancing in the caños, in the kind of drainage channels. So here we are putting these together. They're very simple to build, and then they kind of can be placed periodically along that fall so that in effect they stop the water flow and it goes right back into the ground. So here's some of those images. Here we are with students from the Universidad Central de Venezuela, the Facultad de Arquitectura, who are doing their community service with us. And again, the point, just like the Anexo Casa de Todos, is a forest that's an excuse to create a network of affection and the strength of this project, and the reason we believe it can extend itself in time will not be so much from guarantees of legal documents or anything, but from the engagement of a large pool of people. And so it is growing. This is actually the version that we had in December. I'm a little bit behind on adding all the people to it, but these are the students from the university. These are the high school students right nearby, Alejo Fortique, who have a composting at their site. We have 5 composting altogether. And then the plants have been identified with numbers, and we're measuring a sample of them to make sure that they're doing okay, and if they need, a particular change in the... So these Saturdays are always a ton of fun. By noon, we end up somewhere having beers in La Palomera. This is Edgar, who's been the one to build all the gabions. And we've also rescued this cancha de bolas criollas, or la petanque, or bocce. You see the gabions of the debris on the edge that have become benches. And our last engagement was really fun. 2 weeks ago, the Embassy of Switzerland reenacted a version of Neighbors, which was at the 2023 biennial in Venice at the Swiss Pavilion. And so basically, I'll get to that at the end. But we did a walk from Piedra Azul, which is down here where this it's down here where this path is that you see at the very bottom. And we are able to take a walk through the whole forest and then come down through one of these walkways and arrive at the Casa de Todos. So this is what it looks like at the beginning now with our fences. And we were something like 60 people together with the ambassador of Switzerland who came with us, and friends and folks from the middle class neighborhood and folks from La Palomera. At the end, we're now part of our green path to connect is this, which here at the end, you can sort of tell that the Casa de Todos is right there. And the enactment was a play that features the pavilion of Switzerland and the pavilion of Venezuela, who are neighbors literally at the Giardini of the Venice Biennial, impersonating the buildings and their history. It's a beautiful play, and it's encapsulated in a book called Neighbors that the Swiss Embassy also produced. So to wrap things up, I think I'm way over time, but Rio Guaire is our ongoing project at this moment. Also, the river in the city is a sewage channel, basically. And people are quite comfortable. It's been naturalized this way. There's no sense of duty in reverting or changing this. So in 2020, with the support of the US Embassy, we had a grant that allowed us to build a website of all this archival material that records what the river has been since the foundation of the city, as well as collaborations with essays from people of all kinds of disciplines, from art to biology to ecology to literature. And we toured our river edges to kind of get to know them, even at the very last part where it's not channeled anymore. And then with artist friends such as Malu Valerio and Gerardo Rojas, we went and produced a game for children of schools nearby. And I won't go into that, but it was fantastic. Then we decided, all this enthusiasm that was raised could be channeled into a concrete project. Hopefully, we had no idea how this was going to happen. It's our first time, but trying to build sort of a momentum of making activities along one lane of a 4-lane street in Colinas de Bellomonte, which is right next to the river, and that we could hopefully, with very, very simple gestures, transform this into a park space next to the water. Oh, this is not going to work. So you're not going to get to see what it supposedly is going to look like. But this was fraught with obstacles, problems. I can't even go through all the naming of them. We've mapped that out as well. But we did in the Casa Todos a kind of a brainstorming with folks. This is the map of all our troubles to get to this point. But as of March, it is now a real project where, once again, we're reusing the debris to make drainage, filtration drainage, just like we learned to do at the forest. And here we are kind of reusing all that debris, taking asphalt out, taking concrete out, and making permeable surfaces. So these squares are so that permeable concrete will drain into. So getting a lot of this rainwater to go back into the ground, which is really important, the porous concrete coming on top. And the end goal is for us to reflect on how the river needs to become a healthy river again. We have naturalized as well that river is sick and contaminated, but we are the ones who contaminate it. And approaches that consider large plantas de tratamiento or water treatment plants are excessively expensive and very unlikely to be maintained in time. So we're starting this conversation about how locally every single atom that constitutes the city can clean their own waters and restore the river through our own implication. That's kind of, in a nutshell, I think what we've learned to apply to most of our projects. And I thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, Elisa. I hope you're hearing the clapping because it's really impressive and really inspiring. I have a question that I will need to save for the end, but I really would like to hear you to talk more about some specific things. So Fernanda, welcome. To introduce Fernanda Canales, she's an architect and educator. She holds a PhD in architecture cum laude from the Higher Technical School of Architecture of Madrid, a master's degree from the Polytechnic University of Catalunya in Barcelona, and a professional degree in architecture from the Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico. She's currently a visiting professor at Columbia University Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, and she has previously held visiting appointments at Harvard University Graduate School of Design, Princeton School of Architecture, Yale School of Architecture, and the Architectural Association in London. Again, also faculty of La Escuela. Thank you, Fernanda, and the room is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Miguel. It's an honor for me to participate in this panel talk along with such admired colleagues as Oscar, Renata, Elisa Silva, and thank you everyone for your time. So I will present today very briefly 7 projects that deal in different scales with different programs, but they're all focusing in public space and how, with this idea of transforming the minimal into the collective maximum, we can really impact cities. So the first project is an intervention at Mexico City in the Botanical Garden in Chapultepec with reused pellets, wooden pellets that were just almost trash. And the idea was to provide a space that really people could use. The Botanical Garden in Chapultepec, until recently, this was a project probably 7 years ago. It was just a place that had it didn't have any actually open space towards the street or towards the city. And the idea was to really frame the views, make people stop. There's a very near subway station and people just went past, but they could never stay because there were no benches or not really a place to play or really to have an advantage of the views and the trees. So the idea of this intervention, it was supposed to be built in just 3 hours and last for 4 days. But the impact was so large that the piece stayed for more than a year. And then we actually did a second piece with the same pellets, and the intervention lasted for 4 years. And it became a place for people really to take advantage of the natural environment in a very dense city as Mexico City. People could climb the wall. So it was a very simple project intended to extend the space and really invite people in. So the intention here was to use the piece in very improvised manners and to have people in a way reclaim a space that was just a transit space. The second project, very similar in the same park, but on the other side of Reforma, just behind the Museo Tamayo, as well in Chapultepec in Mexico City. And it was a project for an open pavilion, the idea to design an open museum, again, with very scarce means, and an intervention that was supposed to last for 3 months, and then it stayed like for 8 months. And the intention was, again, to provide a place where people could enter, stay. We provided benches, and the interior of the pavilion was an open pavilion with no roof at all. And the interior was designed with glasses, with mirrors, and the outside was very black. So it contrasted with the museum, which is it's built in concrete by Teodoro González de León and Abraham Zabludovsky in the 80s. So this piece was, if the other one was large, this one was minimum, very small. If the other one was very rough texture, this one was in a way very light in the inside, very dark on the outside. So this play between the inside and the outside, for me, it's sort of designing a sock that could be turned around. And when you enter the space, you discover that the museum is the trees and the views, the sky, and obviously the people. So you see the building, the massive building on the left, and then this very tiny space that with the projection of the mirrors, you could double or triple the vegetation that exists, and it became a place to really see the existing, similar to the past project, just to acknowledge what we have that we usually don't even see, and making also the people be part of the experience and part of even the exhibition. So it's not about showing objects, valuable objects, but of making the valuable part of a project being just the people who pass by and now have a place to sit, a place to play, and to view the surroundings with another lens. And then the third project is reading room. It was commissioned to design the interior space of an abandoned apartment in Mexico. In Infonavit, these are the housing estates built by the government in the 70s, which are facing enormous problems of abandonment and security. So the government owns a lot of empty apartments. And I had finished recently a library, the Centro Cultural Elena Garro, and it was the same cultural institution of that time. They had gained like 1,000 books from Fondo Cultura Económica. So they wanted to for me to design bookshelves and colonize an abandoned apartment and showcase the 1,000 books that had been donated. But I was really worried about this commission, really frightened, because if it was supposed to be a public space, for me it was very important that it was actually public and visible. And outside, there was nobody that was going to be able to take care of the spaces, and being in an inside with no visibility made them even more insecure. So when I went to visit the different housing states, this was supposed to be a first prototype and then continue into 32 states that we have in Mexico, so one for each city. And the condition was always the same. These public spaces that had been illegally privatized with cages, we call them like jaulas, where people just put a lock and intended for parking spaces, but sometimes they don't even have cars, or they just use them to store spaces, and they become very insecure spaces, usually fostering abandonment and insecurity. So after visiting many of these housing states, I went back to the government and said, can we spend the same amount of money and just use one of these cages in order to reclaim the public space and do it again for the people, make it public and visible? And the response was, as usual, it's like, we don't have any money, we don't have any space. What we got is just the money to refurnish an interior, just take out the kitchen and put inside the books and have just a restroom. So my idea was, give me one cage, and with the same amount of money, with very simple materials, just for different conditions, a lattice done with brick, with the concrete, like the cheapest building material. Also a project done to be built informally or self-built by the communities. So the 4 elements are just metal doors, the lattice, so it's always visible. You can always hear and see what's happening inside. And then a concrete roof, and then just the floor. Also thought to be flooded inside, because the places, mainly these housing states, are done in the most unsafe regions. So water could enter one side and up to your waist be completely flooded, and nothing could be either broken or stolen. So very, very simple project. And if it was successful, we could build another floor on top, or even colonize the parking space on one side, on the other or on the back or front. So they were built in 32 states, in Guerrero, Veracruz, Oaxaca, Nayarit, and they all have different conditions because the community made them their own. So sometimes they have this upper floor, or sometimes they have places to store trash, but they have become very important public spaces again. And it has even been an excuse for people to colonize again their parking space that was intended initially as a public plaza. So they're the places where people have their first communion or even weddings, classes. So it's the only shaded space that communities have. And obviously they can use it in different ways. You can see how even the bookshelves are designed for flooding to happen from 1 meter from the floor to your waist. So very, I would say, projects that are thought for self-appropriation, and instead of fighting against the uncertainties, trying to make uncertainty part of the project. Then this fourth project is an intervention done with several other urbanists, architects in Mexico City, in an attempt to take the architectural discussions outside and involve the people that really use the city and are sometimes really marginalized in the public discussions. So it consisted of an intervention, 3 days, and in the public Plaza de Zócalo, which apparently more than 1 million people pass by every day. So the first day was just about mapping the plan of the city, and obviously the demarcations, the differences between political demarcations, territorial and geographical conditions, and also the different municipalities, the water, still the lakes and rivers that we are desiccating still today, paving with roads. And also we placed, the last day, we placed small plants for people to even take them home. But the intention was for the public to participate. For example, we started mapping all of the lacustic condition, the historical lake that still lies underneath this public plaza. Just, I mean, if you, it's 30 centimeters below this huge, massive concrete square, and you still have this condition that we don't acknowledge. Mexico City could be self-sustainable in terms of rainwater. We receive enough rainwater to provide the city all of the water that's needed annually. But instead, we send 90% of our rainwater directly to the sewage. So this was just an intention to take all of these discussions outside and make people understand them in another way, and obviously participate in different conditions, and understanding like the absurdities of lines that were once drawn in a desk or in an office space that have no relation with the geographical or even cultural or historical conditions. And then the last 3 projects that I will present today, they're projects done in Sonora, in the desert, in the border cities of Naco and Agua Prieta. And you can see the line is the border wall, which is a really violent division. And this public projects, it was a series of 7 projects. I will only focus on 3 of them. But the intention was to provide safe public space in cities that lack, I mean, they don't even have sidewalks. So it was really an attempt to take people out to the streets and really make them be able to use their city and their public space. So the first one consists of a small pavilion. Actually, it's just a place to house some restrooms in the public plaza in Naco. And it's on the border city with Douglas. And you have this very small pavilion, but it was an excuse actually to colonize the square and provide pavement that also becomes benches and places to sit, and then you can use the rooftop of this pavilion. The bathrooms are inside, are the most massive elements of this pavilion, but they contain a lattice wall, so you can always hear and see what's happening inside, similar to the reading rooms, because you have to provide safety even in the harshest conditions. And then the possibility to go up and see the city, see the city for the first time from above, because these are very horizontal towns, mainly designed with one-floor structures. And this is the second one is a border library in Agua Prieta. And similar to the past project, it's conditioned by this very heavy division. You can see Mexico is on the lower part and the US it's on the upper part. And again, the library becomes an excuse to provide public space, a linear park that goes from a baseball field all the way to the entrance of the crossing. So you have a very small town, but you have 4,000 crossings every day, which makes it a really important epicenter of interrelation between the US and Mexico. But people do not have, until now, did not have a place to sit or a shade in a very hot, desertic landscape. Many students, for example, many kids go to school to the US, and every day cross with the bus. The parents take them to the gate, and they wait for them when the bus is coming at the end of the day. And many people, also workers, go back and forth every day, but they didn't have any place to sit. So the project for the library is an excuse to rethink the meaning of not only the library in terms of maybe it's for people who will never read a book or don't even know how to read, but to feel invited and be part of this public project, and the project to extend into this public park or linear park that connects the sports facility on the other side. So this was the context for the project. It's sort of like I would say the back or the rear of a residential area, but with a very violent neighbor, very present, very tall. So the project is placed as near as possible to the wall. At some point, the commission presented the possibility of doing the project a bit farther away because everyone felt the wall was super violent and nobody would want to have that as a view. But for me, it was really important to place it as near as possible, even I would say even illegally or riskily near the wall, and really try to change that perception from a division, understanding the wall as a division, to understand the wall as a place, and really as changing the perception of a place. So here you have the whole linear park, which extends almost for 2 kilometers. And the library is elevated to provide a shading space for somebody that will never enter a library, and have also toilets. So similar to the other project, the intention is, for me, the public program, the first public program that we need are just restrooms or shades, or a bench. So this is an image of the library in the park completed. And the library becomes also like a mirador, a tower, or an outlook space to be able to see to the other side, which is always, there are many people who cannot cross, and they always want to see what's on the other side, or they imagine their lives better if they were able to cross. So in a way, I provided a ramp and the possibility to see to the other side, so visually link the two towns, but also to see themselves. So it's, again, the first project that you can go up and see the whole town, see the views of the wonderful mountains. And on the lower ground floor, you have the toilets and you have sort of an open forum for concerts, public space to be used as anybody can invent and appropriate it. And it's a place to play and to really feel safe and connected, not only to the gate, but also to this part of the city that was really neglected. And the importance to provide shade and to use materials as in the other projects that are very raw and very cheap and local, so easy to maintain. And the public library has also lattices, so you always see what's inside. It has cross ventilation, so you don't need air conditioning or any expensive operational or maintenance of the buildings, but a very, I would say, economic way of understanding our materials and what was available. These projects were, the seven of the projects in Sonora were built during the pandemic. So we had to struggle with scarcity in many ways. And then we have, lastly, the border overlook, which becomes also an excuse to visually link both sides of the border. This one is in Naco, and it was the entrance of the city. Anyone who goes from Mexico to the US in this part of Sonora has to go directly inside the town. And people from the town were always complaining, saying people pass by and they never know when they arrive to Naco and when they already leave Naco. So they wanted to have like an entrance or a sign to welcome the visitors. This is the town of El Chapo Guzman, the drug dealer. It was where he did his first tunnel. So it's a place with a lot of issues regarding violence, but also being a town where everyone just wants to cross to the other side. So just being a place to cross or pass by. And the project is located in these two intersections of the highway, where cars and trucks pass really fast. So the intention was to lower the velocity. This is the image of the site before the intervention. Lower the velocity of the cars and acknowledge that you have arrived somewhere. So we changed the traffic and designed sort of an island in the middle of this roads in order to really have a place to stay, to be, to provide this entrance. Very basic structure, just a grid, again, with the same simple material, just brick and concrete, but providing an identity of the place and using the color of the sand and of the desert, and providing, again, the overlook. So it's a market that it's only a shade, actually, and the intention is to be able to go up and see your town or your country or whatever for the first time, for people who have only 1 or 2 level buildings. So it provides a different meaning and a different way of not only seeing the other side always, but also seeing yourself, and has an open forum on one of the sites, and it becomes like a public open plaza and a place actually to colonize in different ways. It's similar to the reading rooms. It's where people are having their first communion or their graduation. So it's the only safe public space that exists. And just to finish, 3 images from the artist, Mexican artist Lorena Wolfer, who questions what is public and where does the public begin in this sign or billboard. She says, this is not a billboard, this is a public space. who controls the public, who designs the public, and where does the public space begin? So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fernanda. It's amazing to see like the scale of your work and how like from something extremely permanent and then goes to something that is like more ephemeral to something completely like tactic or artistic as the intervention in the Plaza Zocalo with the same artistic sensibility. And also I think that's something that happens here with four of you, different approaches in terms of kind of like a scale and way of like being permanent or infrastructural in a way. In the case of Elisa, I have some questions, but I would love if you start like asking other questions that can come from the audience here or even from any of you. We have a short time because the National Academy is about to close very soon. But of course, it's a great opportunity to exchange and asking questions and comments. Yes, and we have here. Hi. Sorry. Can you hear? Because I did something with the. You hear the Fernanda? Okay, I will bring it just in case.
Thank you so much for your talk, Fernanda. And I have a question, but first, your intentionality with the public library design, and you're almost this like illegal, as you said, placement next to the borderline and border wall. And my question is, in your practice, have you ever encountered the like institution that was not willing to acknowledge the political tensions that exist in design, especially architectural design? And how do you still execute those projects, or have you executed those projects? Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you. Wonderful question. I don't have the response of how to do it. I always attempt to do a bit more and to try to move to directions that institutions do not care or do not like or are afraid to. So I've only managed to do it when they don't notice. So yeah, it hasn't been voluntary for them. So it has been just an idea of pushing limits and hoping nobody sees, because I haven't had the chance to work with somebody that supports the critical view or intentions or wants to take risks, at least not in politicians I've met. And I would say in 25 years, it has not happened. But it has happened that in this case, specifically a pandemic, people were not able to travel, they were not supervising work, everything was a bit difficult. So I took advantage of that. And with the reading rooms, it was also just like playing by chance, like give me just one corner, it's 2.5 meters times 2.5, nobody will notice. But it's more about not them wanting to support an idea, but people saying, okay, if it's 2.5 meters, then there shouldn't be any complaint. No? So it's more about trying to find the gaps between systems that do not support risk or critical thinking.
Thank you so much for your wonderful answer. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
I actually have a question for Elisa, although also I feel like it's related to Fernanda's work. I was wondering about the role of community participation in planning, and especially how we can sort of take, especially projects like Casa de Todos as a model for warding off speculative sort of real estate and land zoning in there's other geographies. I guess here I'm in New York, and so that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. I would say that's we're betting on that the fact that so many folks are engaged and affectionately kind of related to this space because they use it, because it's where they go to hang out. It's what Ray Oldenburg calls a third space or a third place, you know, not your home, not your work, but a third place. That's something that our commodified world has been kind of eking out, you know, these places that were the pub. The pub was the public house in Great Britain. And it was a place where you could get a cheap beer and just hang out. And that's what the Casa de Todos really represents for a lot of people. But it was something that evolved organically. Like we didn't will it to the place. I think that what happened in this experience transformed our practice and weighing in a whole lot more on just a slower speed, a slower pace. And that wasn't by design. That was just because we're doing this as we find funds, as we get, you know, support to do certain things. But also a lot comes from the folks themselves who, I think, seeing it always somehow not complete because it's never presented as like, this is the project. We achieved everything that was in the project. Here you go. Use it, you know. It's a pattern of or a process that people feel very compelled to like project their ideas onto it. And I think that's been really helpful in us learning, like, my goodness, this needs to be this way. And then it is super successful as that kind of a space for the folks because we didn't will it. It came from people. But then on the other hand too, like, so you get a richer program, you get a richer design just from others' input. And then at the same time, this feeling that everybody has that their ideas are welcome, you know, that in fact, many of them do materialize. And so somehow really everyone is in there using it, designing it, thinking about it, wondering how it could continue to be transformed. That's why our governance group has been so, I think, fantastically like it's a beautiful thing that has come from the process of the house. So in the face of speculation at some point or a different use, I imagine the resistance would be so enormous. It would really make it a much less, I mean, other places might become much more interesting for people to tackle than this one. We have a long-term lease from the municipality at present for 10 years. That's extendable to 20. So that's kind of our guarantee in time for now. But, you know, that I think is something that I really struggle with. Like, how can we as architects strengthen other ways of having space accessible? And the commons is our ticket. It's our only ticket. And can we become more agile at articulating how we value the commons, how it becomes evident for politicians that this has value? How can we somehow, I don't know, as a force within all of these actors, seduce more and more people into using a place like the Anexo Casa de Todos and becoming enamored with all of its possibilities? I think that's our capacity for seduction is a big part of this resistance that hopefully I think more of us can get on that train of thought.
Thank you, Paul.
Any other questions?
Hi, thank you all for sharing your incredible work. I sort of have a two-part question, I think, for the entire panel. I was really struck from how you can go from speculative work to realization. I think with Oscar's research, goes into an open call and realizes green space where it didn't exist before. With the ensayos urbanos, where it goes from the biennial to a larger scale. Elisa, the La Casa de Todos expands into El Bosque, and I think it's Fernanda, the realization of the libraries across the country. My questions are, what are some of the challenges that you find when you go from speculation and scale it to the commons and to the public? And on the other hand, Fernanda, I recall that you mentioned that you were mentioning about the water that rains into the Mexico that's enough for the city, but it goes to waste. So I think all of you touched on environmentalism, and in your works, where are you compromising your values? So like wanting to lean into an environmentalist perspective and the limitations that you find, and how you're compromising with like cement, which is really negative for the environment, but at the same time allows you to realize the project. So whoever wants to take on this question.
That's a good one for you.
Yeah, jump in. I feel that's a really good question, because I feel now I'm equal amount of years being an architect here, and some amount of years I was an architect back home, and I feel navigating the public space here is definitely a different animal. And I mean, there was one project I didn't present, but it's a garden I developed with territorial empathy the year before the abstract installation. And I feel for both things to have existed, you definitely need like open minds, open to like different concepts and conversations that are maybe a little bit challenging from what the institutions usually kind of like run with. And I think I can see a similar process from Fernanda and Elise and these persons that are community driven, like the Garden in the Bronx, where we decided we didn't want to compromise the spirit or the vision of the project, and use a harder journey and it kind of evolved into like many different like ways. But I think the result was we also managed to keep that sort of like myth and speculation alive, because the community that we were talking to, that was their language already. So we were merely translating their kind of like myth and faith the reality about how we talk about the art in the space into an architectural discussion.
Yeah, keeping the myth alive.
Yeah.
It's Oscar.
Yes.
Well, I'd like to add something to that, because yes, I absolutely hate concrete as well. And it is really hard to do public spaces that have this requirement of enduring, and people want it to, the expectation. I'm actually doing this public space next to the river with permeable concrete, so water will be able to seep through it. And I insisted very much on that, but it has a different resistance than pure concrete. And my hope is, and we've tested it, that it'll wither okay in time, but it's a bit of a leap. And fortunately, like but it's still concrete. I think the main point that I've been able to work into projects is to do something with the debris. Like you demolish something, you take something out, incorporate that into the design of your space, like use it, do a landfill, make drainage, filtration drainages, just keep that footprint within the project and don't displace it to landfills, basically. And we've been starting to do that systematically in like homes that we're remodeling. We have one in particular where we're building this kind of retaining wall, and we'll have a little bocce court there, and it's one way, but I think it's a really good question, and I think our fascination with concrete as a profession really needs to be hacked.
Sure. Thanks, Elisa.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I want to jump in with the compromising value question, which is something I obviously ask myself a lot. But the reality is that I don't pay for my project. Mm-hmm. So I need somebody to pay for the project. And that is, by start, a huge compromise, because the client it's not me, and my will is not, I cannot pursue my values without somebody agreeing to pay for those values. And that's a huge difficulty. I obviously understand my clients not as the owner or as the people who pay, but as the people who use the spaces, and even the one who cleans the space, or the neighbor. But owners and the people who pay feel they are the owners or the clients. So that's always a struggle. And it's similar with the struggle that Elisa just mentioned with concrete. I also dislike concrete, and I would love to have my work done in terracotta or tierra compactada or wood. But it's not only about compromising my values over and over, or fighting against that compromise, but also of adapting to the reality. And in Mexico, concrete is not obviously cheaper and has less impact with CO2 because it's all over. No, it's something that you can take with just a small bag, which I always use. I never use concrete with big trucks and the mixture, like the very industrialized way of understanding concrete, but a very simple, even mostly informal way of using even local concrete and local brick. But that's not an excuse. What it is really happening, and that I feel is a problem, that we're used to judging the ecology or the sustainability of materials from a global understanding of what seems or what looks more ecological, which would be better than concrete. But if, I don't know, if you have in Canada or Europe very well-regulated ways of having wood, which is really a process and certified and everything. In Mexico, for example, wood is in the hands of drug cartels, which own the land, and really it's much worse than using concrete sometimes or mainly. So if I were to use wood, I would have to purchase it from Europe or Canada and bring it to Mexico. Or I decide to use concrete from the local community that does these very small packages. And it's so trying to understand the very local conditions and not our global perceptions of what ecology is.
Thank you.
We have time to one last question. We are very due over time, and I think they're gonna kick us out or turn the lights out. So
I have a question for Fernando's. Hi, I'm Terrence. I was one of Oscar's students in Colombia, and I'm also a big fan of minimal spaces. So through your presentation, I have a glimpse of your ethos in design, but can you tell me more about your thought process on how to design or derive the form itself, especially more poetic driven spaces, which are not functional in the traditional sense?
A question for me? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning. Yes.
Can you repeat my question once more?
Yes, I'm sorry. Sound is not working well.
My question is, how do you derive the form of of your more poetic driven spaces, which are not functional in the traditional sense? Yeah.
Yes, I always try to question the program because sometimes it's a given of somebody that receives a brief and has not really thought of the consequences of their program. For example, the 7 projects in the border were a brief done in an office, in a federal government office in Mexico City, of somebody who had never visited the site. And when I went there and visited and spoke to the citizens, they really needed other things. And just trying to understand the program as a more open interpretation of the actual needs. And that's why if somebody asks for a library, I had done one before, and actually that library, the people who use the most are people who just go inside to use the bathroom. So after really understanding how some of the institutional programs work, people, what they need is just the possibility to drink water and have an internet or place to sit down. And understanding that made me, in that specific project, decide to place the library above to really guarantee the shade underneath. And because I know sometimes these buildings are not taken care of, they don't have any budget. So it's a politician that just does the inauguration, and then there's nobody to pay for the lights or even open, or there are not even books. So I just left the space above for whatever could happen in the future, but guaranteeing this very social public space. And that's similar with other projects. I try to, instead of fighting against these uncertainties, I take what's really sure, what we know we need, and try to play with the basics.
That's very inspiring for me. Thank you very much.
And here I am again to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Fernanda, Elisa, and Zeus Urbanos, Oscar, all of you. It's been a wonderful session, but also a wonderful month of working together here. Thank you to the National Academy for holding us for a little while. And yeah, let's continue working together. Hopefully, there will be more opportunities to connect and join here. Final clap.
Thank you very much.
Gracias. Adiós.
Gracias.
Pleasure, thank you. Gracias.
Bye.
Elisa, soy tu fan número 1.
Ay, Fernanda, qué
Somos.
bella.